The nursery rhyme was simple enough. Born on a Monday, christened on Tuesday, married on Wednesday, took ill on Thursday, grew worse on Friday, died on Saturday, buried on Sunday. That was the end of Solomon Grundy, except it wasn't. The poem first appeared in 1842, published in a collection of British nursery rhymes by James Orchard Halliwell. Most people assumed it was just a dark little ditty about mortality, a reminder that life moves fast and death comes for us all. But the truth is far stranger. You see, the rhyme wasn't invented in 1842. It was documented in 1842. The legend itself stretches back centuries, rooted in English folklore that most historians have conveniently forgotten. The original Solomon Grundy wasn't a fictional character. He was a marsh dweller. In the wetlands of eastern England, particularly around the fens of Cambridgeshire and Lincolnshire, locals told stories of a man who lived alone in the bog, a hermit, an outcast. Some versions say he was a criminal fleeing justice. Others claim he was simply a man driven mad by grief. What everyone agreed on was the manner of his death. Grundy was murdered. His body was dumped in the swamp, weighted down with stones, left to rot in the black water. The killers, and there were several, according to legend assumed, that would be the end of it. The marsh would consume him. Nature would do the rest. They were wrong. The swamp didn't consume Solomon Grundy. The swamp preserved him. Now, this part of the legend draws from real science, even if the people at the time didn't understand it. Peat bogs are remarkably effective at preserving organic matter. The acidic, oxygen-poor environment prevents decomposition. Bodies dumped in these wetlands have been discovered centuries later, still intact. Archaeologists call them bog bodies. But the locals of medieval England had a different explanation. They believed the swamp was cursed. They believed that anyone buried there without proper Christian rites would be denied entry to the afterlife. Their soul would remain trapped, bound to the decaying flesh, unable to move on. And Solomon Grundy, murdered and discarded like garbage, had received no funeral, no prayers, no blessing. According to the legend, 7 days after his death, something emerged from the marsh. It wasn't quite Solomon Grundy, not anymore. The thing that crawled from the bog was bloated, covered in muck and vegetation, its skin stained dark by the tannins in the water. It moved slowly, clumsily, as if relearning how to use limbs that had stiffened in death. The rhyme, as it turns out, was a warning. Each line marked a stage of transformation. Born on Monday, that was his emergence from the swamp, a twisted rebirth. Christened on Tuesday, the creature wandered into a village, and terrified locals threw holy water at it, desperate to drive the demon away. Married on Wednesday, this line is more ambiguous, but some scholars interpret it as the creature finding a companion, another lost soul drawn to its presence. By Thursday, it had taken ill. By Friday, it grew worse. The creature's body was failing, decomposing even as it walked, and on Saturday, it died again. But here's the thing about Solomon Grundy. Death didn't stick. The legend claims he was buried on Sunday, only to rise again the following Monday. The cycle repeated, over and over. An endless loop of death and resurrection, each iteration more grotesque than the last. This is where the folklore gets truly dark. Villages near the marshes developed rituals specifically to prevent Grundy's return. They would salt the earth around his grave. They would burn effigies. Some communities even posted guards at the swamp's edge, watching for any sign of movement in the mist. None of it worked. The creature kept coming back, and each time it returned, it seemed to remember less of its human life. The man Solomon Grundy had been was eroding, replaced by something purely predatory, something hungry. Now, skeptics will point out that bog bodies don't actually reanimate. Fair point. But the legend wasn't meant to be taken literally. It was a story communities told to explain the unexplainable, the strange lights seen over the marshes at night. The sounds of movement in the fog, the occasional disappearance of travelers foolish enough to cross the fens after dark. Oh, the marsh was dangerous. The marsh killed people. And the easiest way to keep villagers away from it was to tell them a monster lived there. But here's what's interesting. The rhyme survived. It outlasted the villages that created it, spread across England, then crossed the Atlantic to America. By the 20th century, it had become a children's song, its dark origins completely sanitized. Kids would chant it on playgrounds, having no idea they were reciting an ancient warning about an undead marsh creature. In 1944, DC Comics introduced a character named Solomon Grundy, a hulking, zombie-like villain who was appropriately born in a swamp. The writers claimed inspiration from the nursery rhyme, though whether they knew the full legend is unclear. What they captured, intentionally or not, was the essence of the original myth. Grundy wasn't just undead. He was cursed, trapped in a cycle he couldn't escape, dying and rising endlessly, losing more of his humanity each time. The ancient Britons believed this was the worst fate imaginable, not death, but undeath, existing without truly living, conscious enough to suffer, but unable to stop. That was the real horror of Solomon Grundy. Somewhere in the wetlands of England, if you believe the old stories, he's still out there, waiting for Monday.